All right, are you ready for the word? All right, let's get started this morning. We're going to begin, as already been stated, a brand new three-part series called At the Table. This is a series about the family. I cannot speak for you, but I love my family. My wife, my kids and their spouses, and my grandkids. Have I told you about my grandkids? Yeah, Briley, Addie, Ellie, and Easton. I love my family. One of the reasons why I love my family so much is because of the many struggles that I had as a kid in the family I was born into. I can remember as a child, I remember as a kid looking at other families, literally looking at some of them with envy. Looking at how they interacted, look at the way they treated one another. And I remember looking at these other families with envy and wishing that my family was more like theirs. At least theirs appeared to be. I remember having a tremendous desire to get married and begin a family of my own, hoping to create that family dynamic that my heart longed for. I don't know, maybe some of you can relate. Now, even though my birth family wasn't all that I wanted it to be, it wasn't all bad. We had our moments. I remember as just a little boy, me and my three siblings, we would climb up on mom and dad's bed early on Saturday morning, and the six of us engage in conversation. I can also remember supper time at the kitchen table. I grew up in Oklahoma, and we called the evening meal supper. Yeah, it was breakfast, dinner, and supper. And at supper time, the entire family assembled. And it was at the table where most of our interaction took place. My mom always had a hot meal prepared, and we would all gather around the table and eat together every single night. My mom was an incredible cook. Listen, I'm going to tell you that nobody could fix fried chicken like my mama, except my wife. Yeah. I was born at night, not last night. Amen. Mom was a great cook. She cooked a lot of really good things and always provided a hot meal for supper. One of my favorite meals, she did this for breakfast, but sometimes at night, and she did this, and I kind of got in the habit of that, and I even like it to this day. But one of my favorite meals that my mama cooked was homemade biscuits and gravy. I don't mean just gravy. I mean chipped beef gravy. Listen, if I ever drown, I hope it's in gravy. Everyone in the family had their assigned seats at the table. And every meal we automatically sat in our assigned seats. Except when Mama fixed biscuits and chipped beef gravy. And when we knew that we were having biscuits and gravy, my older brother Dennis, he wouldn't sit at his regular seat. He would wait and see where Mom placed the gravy bowl. And he would sit right in front of the gravy bowl, so that he would be first to dip the gravy. And I would yell out, Mom, Dennis is getting all the chipped beef out of the gravy. I don't know, maybe you have a story or two you could tell from the time that your family gathered around the table. Some of the most precious and most meaningful memories we have took place at the table. And that's our series for the next 3 weeks, At the Table, talking about the family. Today we're going to begin talking about parenting. Next week, we're going to focus on marriage. We're going to have a marriage one-night training on Saturday night, and then on Sunday, we're going to conclude with a message on marriage. Joey and Stacy Alcala will be our special guest speakers for the marriage weekend. It is going to be awesome. You do not want to miss. Then the following week, I'll be back with part 2 about parenting. So let me challenge you. Don't miss a single opportunity to help strengthen and grow yourself and to grow your family. Now, I have chosen to share with you what I'm calling the 10 Commandments of parenting. The 10 Commandments of parenting. I'm going to share 5 of them today, and then I'm going to share the rest of them on the 25th. Now, before I get into the meat of this today, I want to, first of all, begin with a disclaimer. And the disclaimer is this, and that is I don't claim to be an expert. I'm not going to stand up here as some kind of parental expert this morning. That's not what I'm doing. And I don't claim to have batted 1,000 as a parent myself. My daughter sitting on the front row, I couldn't get by with it. She knows better. There are things that I did that as a father I wish I had not done. And there are things that I did not do that now looking back, how I wish I had done that when the kids were at home. Certainly there are many things that I definitely could have done better than I did. And let me say this morning also, I never teach or preach on family without somebody coming up to me and saying to me afterwards, I wish I'd have heard that 20 years ago. I wish I'd have heard that 30 years ago. If only I could have heard that 40 years ago. I could have been a much better husband or wife. I could have been a much better father or mother. If only I'd have heard that way back then. And then to continue, and they say, I have so many regrets. Please don't beat yourself up. That's not what this is all about. Please don't beat yourself up. Listen, there's absolutely nothing that we can do about past mistakes. We cannot go back into the past and change anything. There's nothing we can do. It's already been done. Don't beat yourself up. But here's the good news, and that is we can do something about today. And we can do something about tomorrow. And let me tell you something else. It's never too late to improve as a parent. Never too late to improve as a parent. See, even our grown children still need us. I remember several years ago, a good friend of mine, his father passed away. We're about the same age. I don't know how long ago it was, time gets away, but I know he was at least in his 50s. And I'll never forget, as he was talking to me about losing his father, I'll never forget, he looked into my eyes and tears were in his eyes and tears were rolling down his cheeks. And in all sincerity, he looked up at me and he said, "Who's in charge now? Who's in charge now? Dad's gone. Dad has always been the go-to. Dad has always been in charge. Who is in charge now?" This man was at least in his 50s, and yet he still recognized, even though he was grown, even though he had kids of his own, yet he still needed his parents. Never comes a time when we don't need our parents. Amen. I put my hand on his shoulder. I called him by name, and I said, "You are. You are." The good news is this morning that when we mess up, or if we have messed up, we can apologize to our kids. We can take ownership of our past mistakes. My father did. My father certainly was not a perfect father. My father did a lot of things. He did a lot of damage to my life. He didn't bring the affirmation that I needed as a little boy and as a young man. I didn't get that. And there were things that my father did that listen, if you only heard, listen, I can swap stories with you. My dad didn't do everything that he should do. But I want to tell you that my father eventually recognized the mistakes that he made. And oh, let me tell you, I remember it as if it were yesterday, even though it was many, many years ago. In front of our entire family on Christmas evening, my dad, before we opened gifts, he stood up and he addressed the family and he said, I've got to say something to this family. And he looked at every one of his sons and his daughter. He looked at all of his children and he said, I wasn't a very good father. I didn't do what I should have done. I did some things I shouldn't have done. And I'm sorry. I want you to know that I am sorry and I take ownership and I want to do better as time goes by. Listen, it was the turnaround in our relationship. Actually, it was the very beginning of finally beginning to develop a real relationship with my father. Let me tell you that night, my 5'9" little daddy seemed 10 feet tall in my eyes. There's hope. It's not too late. All right, let's get started on the 10 commandments of parenting. The first one is this. Let me say this also to the kids. You may not really like Pastor in the next couple of weeks, but I love you. And I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to tell the truth of the word because it's the best thing for you. First commandment of parenting I want to give you is this. Don't provide them, your children, don't provide them with everything they want. Don't provide for them everything they want. See, the tendency as a parent is to provide our kids with an easier life than what we had. To give them everything that we wanted as a kid, but never got. We love our kids so much and we want them to be totally happy. We want it so bad that we tend to give them anything and everything that they want. Whether that be toys or entertainment or food choices. I had food choices when I was a kid. My mom, at every meal, gave me 2 choices. Take it or leave it. Don't provide your kids with anything and everything their little heart desires. Reject the temptation to spoil them. Why? Because spoiling leads to entitlement. Spoiling leads to dependency. Spoiling can actually cripple your child and make them so soft they will not be able to survive when they get in the real world. The real world, a world where they're not offered multiple choice. The real world without daddy's credit card. A world where they have to work in order to get what they need, in order to get what they want. A man found the cocoon of a butterfly. One day a small opening appeared. He sat and watched the butterfly for several hours as it struggled to force its body through the little hole. Then it seemed to stop making any progress. It appeared as if it had gotten as far as it could and could go no further. So the man decided to help the butterfly. He took a pair of scissors and he snipped off the remaining bit of the cocoon. The butterfly then emerged easily, but it had a swollen body and small shriveled wings. The man continued to watch the butterfly because he expected that at any moment the wings would enlarge and expand to be able to support the body, which would contract in time. Neither happened. In fact, the butterfly spent the rest of its life crawling around with a swollen body and shriveled wings, was never able to fly. What the man in his kindness and haste did not understand was that the restricting cocoon and the struggle required for the butterfly to get through the tiny opening was nature's way of forcing fluids from the body of the butterfly into its wings so that it would be ready for flight once it achieved its freedom from the cocoon. Sometimes struggles are exactly what we need in our life. If we were allowed to go through our life without any obstacles, it would cripple us. We would not be as strong as we could have been. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying this morning. So often people hear not what I say, but what I don't say. So don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that it's wrong to help your kids. I'm not saying it's wrong to give to your kids. I am saying don't spoil them. Don't spoil them by making life too easy for them. You're doing them no favor when you do, and later they will discover, yes, they will, at some point in time, later they will discover that the sun actually does not rise and set over them. Proverbs chapter 20 and verse 21 says, too much too soon is not a blessing in the end. Commandment number 2 this morning is this: don't permit them to do as they please. Yeah, don't permit them to do as they please. Eli the priest did in 1 Samuel, and it didn't turn out well for the entire family. So love your kids. Love them enough to say no sometimes. Love them enough to set boundaries with them. Love them enough to sometimes be unpopular with your kids in order to keep them safe and in order to keep them on the right track. And then love them enough to discipline them if they do get off track. Proverbs chapter 19 and verse 18 says, discipline your children while there is hope. Otherwise, you will ruin their lives. Proverbs chapter 29, verse 15 and 17 says, to discipline a child will produce wisdom in them. Discipline your children, and they will give you peace of mind, and they will make your heart glad. Don't permit your kids to do as they please. Hold them accountable to the rules of the house. You do have some rules in your house, right? You have made these rules clear to your kids, right? You have told them that they will be punished if they disobey these rules, have you? And let me say this, these rules should include household chores. See, everyone who lives in the house, everyone, that even includes you, Dad. I'm just going to make everybody mad today. Everyone who lives in the house should have some responsibilities to help care for and maintain the house. That might be cleaning their room, it might be making their bed, it might be doing the dishes, it might be helping with the laundry, it might be mowing the lawn, whatever that it might be, but everyone in that house should have a responsibility to help care for that house. Age appropriate, of course. I mean, your little toddler should be taught to pick up their toys. Oh, I know. You could pick them up 10 times faster than they could. I know, I've been there. But listen, start early, age appropriate, but everybody ought to have responsibility in the house. Everyone in the house helping make the house function. Let me say this. Kids should not be treated like slave labor. But neither should they be treated as house guests. All right, let's look at the third commandment this morning. That is, don't pressure them to become what you want them to become. Don't try and fulfill your unfulfilled dreams and desires through your kids, because here's the deal. They're going to have their own. They're going to have their own. They're going to have their own dreams. They're going to have their own desires, and theirs probably will not match yours. I remember years ago in another church that I pastored, there was a family in that church, and this father of this family, he wanted his firstborn, he wanted his oldest son to follow in his footsteps. He wanted him to have the same career path he had, to be in the same profession he was. He thought it would be so cool if father and son had the same profession. And he pressured his son to go down the path to be in the same profession that he was in. And wanting to please his father, the young man went off to college, pursuing a degree in the profession of his father. And this young man at college, he squeezed 4 years of college into 6. And still, no degree. Finally, he got the courage to tell his father, Father, I never wanted to be that in the first place. That's not what I want to do with my life. And finally, his dad released him to choose his own path. Don't pressure your kids to become what you want them to become. When my kids were at home, my son, my daughter, my father, who's also a pastor, would say to me, he would say, son, I guess you know that Chad is called into the ministry. Okay, Dad. But Dad, please don't ever tell Chad that. He said, what? I said, please don't ever tell my son that he's called to be a preacher. You say, Pastor, you don't want your son to be a preacher? You're a preacher. I didn't say I didn't want him to be. I didn't want him called by his grandpa. And later when my daughter got a little age on her, my dad would say, well, son, I guess you know, Chris is called into the ministry too. Guess you know that. Dad, again, please, don't tell Krista she's called into the ministry. Please don't hear what I'm not saying. If God wants to call my son, my daughter into the ministry, I'm wonderful. Thank God. I love it. I love doing ministry with my kids. But I want to tell you that they're in the ministry today, not because I let their grandpa call them in the ministry, and not because I call them in the ministry. Because you see, I've been in ministry long enough to know that the time was going to come that if you made it in the ministry, you better know you were called of God. And I knew that if they thought they were just called of grandpa or just called of daddy, they wouldn't make it along the way. I allowed them to have the opportunity to choose their own path as the Lord would lead them. Don't pressure your kids to become what you want them to become. Instead, help them recognize their giftings and how they could be directed. Romans 12 and 6, do you recognize that? We've used it in the last several messages, but here it is again. It says, God has given to each of us individually different gifts for doing certain things well. As a parent, help your kids identify the unique gifts, talents, and abilities that they have. Things that they do well. Things they excel at with little effort. Oh, it just seems to come natural for them. The things that other people say they are good at. The things that they get recognized for. The things they enjoy doing. The things that bring fulfillment to them. Help them recognize these things and then help direct them onto a path where these gifts, talents, and abilities can be applied. See, our particular gifts, talents, and abilities are a clue to what our life's work needs to be. Fourth commandment that I have this morning for you is this, and that is don't pretend to be perfect. As a parent, don't pretend to be perfect. See, the last I checked, Romans 3 and 23 still says that all have sinned and fallen short of God's glorious standard. How many? All? Does all include you? Does it include me? Of course it does. Proverbs 16 and 2 says, people may be pure in their own eyes, but the Lord, He examines their motives. Hey, parents, don't pretend to be perfect. Don't pretend to be perfect now, and don't pretend that you were the perfect child. Resist the temptation to present yourself as Superman or Wonder Woman. Maybe, just maybe, you might need to pull out some of your old report cards from when you were in school. Were they really all A's, as you remember? as you claim they were? What did your teacher report about your conduct? Hey, did you really walk to school in 2 feet of snow uphill both ways with a smile on your face, glad to do it? Don't pretend to be perfect. Resist the temptation to present yourself as Superman or Wonder Woman to your kids. Tell them about your struggles. Be open, be honest, be vulnerable with them. Be real. Be real. The fifth and final one for today is this. Don't protect them from the consequences of their actions. Proverbs 19:19 says that if you rescue someone from the consequences of their actions, you will have to do it again. And probably again. And maybe again. In other words, why should someone stop doing something wrong if they never have to suffer for their actions? See, if a child knows that every time they do something wrong, that their parents will bail them out or repair the damages, hey, why should I stop? Why should I stop? I have a get out of jail free card, compliments of mom and dad. Hey, protecting your children from the consequences of their actions might help in the short run, but be harmful in the long run. And here's what we need to understand, and that is taking responsibility for our actions helps to build character. Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 11 says, no discipline is enjoyable while it is happening. Well, duh. It goes on to say it's painful. But afterward, there will be a peaceful harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way. We're talking about parenting today. It's a daunting task. It really is. See, most of us started the process when we were too young and totally untrained. I was 21 years old when they placed my son into my hands. Too young, totally untrained. Here's what I know. Talking about the family can stir up a lot of emotions. In fact, I totally imagine there's some people that won't even come back the next couple of Sundays because talking about the family brings up a lot of emotions, stirs up a lot. Because you see, not everyone grew up in a loving house. Not everyone experienced the storybook life that began with once upon a time and ends with and they lived happily ever after. Oh, for some, their fondest memories were of their childhood. And for others, they're the memories they're trying to forget. For some, it's a happy story, but for some, it's a horror story. But I've got good news for you today. Aren't you glad I finally got around to some good news? I've got some good news for us today. And the good news is there's another family that you and I can be a part of. It's the family of God, the Christian family.